This is Joyful Enriquez, and welcome to the Blue Palette Podcast. This is the podcast bringing you inspiring stories from professional marine artists and creatives around the world. This podcast is sponsored by the American Society of Marine Artists, a nonprofit whose purpose is to recognize, encourage, and promote marine art and maritime history. There, thank you so much for joining me today for an episode of the Blue Palette Podcast. I'm so excited to be welcoming artist Lisa Egeli to the show today. You know, Lisa Egeli, she paints the people and places that we care about most. She has traveled and painted on location around the world, exhibited widely in museums, and has been featured in magazines and books, including Art Connoisseur Magazine as one of today's masters. She is a third-generation artist in a family of artists, and her formal training was at Chicago's American Academy of Art. She is known for her commissioned portraits and her paintings of shorelines and the sea. Lisa is a fellow and a past president of the American Society of Marine Artists, a signature member of the Society of Animal Artists, a member of the Portrait Society of America, and member of both the century-old Salmagundi Club in New York City and the Washington Society of Landscape Painters. During a more than 35-year career as a professional artist, she has been a passionate observer of nature, and her paintings are exhibited and collected internationally. So Lisa, I am just so thrilled that you could join us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
I'm really excited after meeting you a few years ago at the American Society of Marine Artists Conference. I got to see your work in person for the first time, and it really blew me away and has been very inspiring to me, especially as a younger artist. And I'm just really grateful for this chance to get to chat with you and learn more about you and your story. So I would really like to just start out and ask you just a little bit about your background, what got you interested in art, some of your education, and those kinds of things.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. I think this is a really great thing you're doing, and I appreciate that. And we love having you as a member of American Society of Marine Artists as well. For me, I came from a family of artists, so I'm the third generation in my family. And so it was kind of the path was well worn for me. It was just a matter of choosing to follow it. So I spent a couple of years in college pursuing more academic matters before I realized I really wanted to be in art school. So then I went to the American Academy of Art in Chicago, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And then from there, it was just figuring out how to make a living as an artist from there on out. I have a lifelong passion for the sea, growing up on Chesapeake Bay. So figuring out a way to have that be a big part of my life and my art was really important to me. I'm passionate about travel. I love discovering other parts of the world and learning about other cultures and other places, other geographies. So integrating travel with my career was also really important to me.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, that you went to the American Academy of Art in Chicago. What was that experience like for you? What type of education did you get there, and what kind of things still today do you think that you still take away from that educational experience that you had?
It was, we looked at a lot of art schools because, there are a lot of options out there. And with my parents, I went around and looked and visited the campuses and especially looked at the student exhibitions and the faculty exhibits and just tried to get a sense of a really good curriculum rooted in the fundamentals. And that really appealed to me. Also, as a country girl, the idea of living in the big city in Chicago was really exciting. I loved that. I thought that would just be really a great experience for me. And so that's why I chose that school. I was just really impressed with the teachers and the seriousness of the students and just the focus on fundamentals. They were practicing artists, professional artists who were teaching there. And that just was really, it was really good because I was focused on how do I have a career in this. And I actually, it was probably the Chicago influence, but I really thought about illustration and more commercial art.
Yeah.
Chicago is such a great, design town. It's just a very different side of the art world than what I grew up around. My dad and my grandparents and everybody had much more. I don't really know how to describe it, but just more traditional art education without a whole lot of commercial art. And their careers kind of followed that. Didn't really get into commercial art at all.
Yeah.
So I liked that. That really appealed to me. So that was kind of how I launched as an artist.
Well, it's interesting that there seems to be, especially, I don't know how it was when you were in school, but when I was in school, it seems like there was this really disconnect between you were taught all these fundamental skills, like drawing and values and, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you had some great foundations, but then there wasn't a lot of resources or tools for, okay, now I'm graduated, now I'm out in the world, how do I actually translate these skills now into a way that I could do this as a living, as an artist. So I'm wondering, is that something that you experienced, that there was kind of this awkward period or this difficult period after you got out of the academy and you were trying to figure out, the next step for you after that? What was that process like for you?
Well, that's part of what was so great there is that, for one, I was working, during the summers in between, and the teachers that I had were figuring out ways to make a living. The school was so, I described the American Academy of Art at that time as almost like a trade school where we're learning like the fundamentals of being an artist, but we're also learning, here's how you put together your portfolio, here's how you get out there and here's who you talk to. So people went and interviewed at Hallmark, down in Kansas City, or I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was very focused on like, how do you make a living doing this? And so that really, in fact, I can't remember who it was. One of the graduates stopped me in the hallway right at the end and said, Lisa, do storyboards. You'll make money and it'll really help support you as an artist coming out of art school. And that's what I did. I did that for several years out of art school. It kept me afloat for, gosh, I probably did it more than 5 years, actually.
Okay. So were you freelancing mostly at that
Yeah,
point?
so I was freelancing.
Yeah.
Actually, for 2 years, I worked for an illustrator. I moved from Chicago maybe 6 months after graduating, moved back to Maryland, and I lived in Baltimore. And I worked for an illustrator there I learned how to do marker renderings of, for storyboarding and any kind of comps for print or whatever. And that was just a huge experience for me in terms of learning just how you support yourself as an artist starting out. Because I knew I also wanted to do portraits and I also wanted to paint landscapes. And I was doing those things, but I was doing them kind of on the side. So I just, worked really hard and saved my money for a few years.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, it seems like, we're not really talking about me in this, but I relate so much to what you're talking about. Just kind of in the beginning, trying to figure out, okay, how can I paint what I want to paint, but not necessarily having the clientele or the collection base to do that. And so kind of doing other things that are really your bread and butter while you build up, the other side of things. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? I mean, in art school, I was waiting tables and then afterwards I worked for a caterer and waited more tables. And eventually I realized that, maybe staying up all night doing storyboards was better for me as an artist.
Yeah.
than waiting tables. And I knew the pathway of that my dad had taken as a portrait artist.
Mm.
And I was trying to do that, but it took a while to kind of get that going. And so I kind of needed to have like everything going, the taking the occasional portrait commission that I would get, or a commission to do someone's dog's portrait, or to do a painting of someone's house, or I just did those things, whatever I had to do to support myself. But you're
Yeah.
right, it's a big question. And then there's the question of like, you want to be true to yourself as an artist, but there are some things that they're jobs you're gonna take, not because you're in love with the subject or the art that you're
Mm.
creating for it, but because it supports you, and it feeds you. And
Yeah.
it's not a sin to
Right.
to support yourself. And it's not I never viewed it as a
Mhm.
compromise. I also felt like I was building skills and doing all those things. So
Right. Well, it's
it's all
unfortunate.
part of the thing.
I do talk to a lot of artists that it seems like that they think that somehow that's less than if they have to work another job, or that they have to do art projects that aren't related to their favorite thing. And exactly what you're saying. I don't feel that that's bad at all. That's kind of a necessary part of putting in your time, building
Yeah,
up your skills in your portfolio. And that's just kind of part of it. And
yeah,
I think that especially now, some of the younger artists I talk to, that there's this expectation that you're just going to come out of school, and you're just going to be able to do your dream job, whatever,
right.
and not have to kind of do or work any other kind of job at all. And I find that that's kind of what my expectation was too, that I would be able to do that. And I felt bad in the beginning, having to work at a frame shop or wait tables or whatever. But that's
Yeah,
often very
yeah.
necessary.
Yeah, I remember teachers at the American Academy of Art saying, it'll take you a couple years to really freelancing in illustration before you have enough clients to really support you. And we
Mhm.
were all like, oh, it won't take that long. And 10 years later, I'm like, well, when does this work get consistent?
Yeah.
It takes a long time. It's
Mm,
you're trying to build a career, and it takes a really long time to do that. And the important thing is to just keep learning the whole
yeah.
time. Just really be an eager student, of your art.
Mm. Did you I was wondering, growing up, you said you grew up in a family of artists. Did you feel that there was any kind of pressure associated with that from having kind of successful artists in your family, and that now you're doing it, you comparing yourself to your family members, or that there was a certain expectation on you?
I mean, it definitely cut both ways in a way,
Mm,
because it's a huge benefit to have the support of your family,
yeah.
and to not have to overcome that big hurdle of, you want to do what?
Right.
It's it's that's everyone is like, okay, they know that you can have an art career. You can be an
Mhm.
artist and support yourself and have a career. But then the question is, am I going to be a good enough one? Like, your expectations and the bar is set really high. It's like, if you're
Mm,
going to do it, you better really work hard at it, and you better really dig deep and do your very best. And so I definitely pushed myself and compared myself to, my dad and relatives with decades and decades of experience on me.
mm,
I definitely, that definitely was a challenge, to get
mm.
past that. And going to Chicago was great because I got to be in a different world where everyone was learning a different way to be an artist. And I got exposed to a lot more contemporary art, and
Mm.
a lot more diversity of art that I hadn't really been exposed to before. So that was
Yeah.
hugely influential for me. And
Mm.
then after working for the illustrator for a couple years, I decided I needed to make a change. And I quit, and I took the money I had saved up, and I bought an around the world plane ticket, and I gave my cat and
Wow.
my car to my parents, and I took off for 9 months
Mm.
and traveled around the world and painted. And part of what I wanted to do was to figure out if I really wanted to pursue art as a career because I wanted to, or just
Mhm.
because it was what everybody in my family did. And in the end, I came away feeling like, no, I really love this. This is what I want to do.
Mm.
This is the kind of work I want to do.
Man.
I did sketches and paintings all along the way, and then mailed them back to my parents. It was the most incredible experience.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like the life right there. Traveling around and being able to experience different cultures and places and kind of preserve those really special experiences and memories in, art pieces. That's very special. I
It
know
was a
how.
hugely influential experience for me in terms of being an observer of the world, in terms of what I wanted to capture of the world around me, what I wanted to convey with my work, being empowered to travel, to be on my own out in the world. As an introverted
Mhm.
artist, it was a big challenge, but it
Yeah.
really it was a huge influence on me.
Mm. Over the years, have you encountered any specific challenges, or I don't know, like rejection or discouragement or burnout? And if so, how have you, during those kind of times or phases in life, how do you deal with that?
I've had plenty. Anyone who's had a career in this has done that. I have actually a couple of file folders in my cabinet of rejection letters because I always kept them. Now, of course, they're emails if you get them,
Right.
but uh, but I kept them all, and it's really useful to be reminded that I have a volume, a
Yeah.
collection of these rejection letters. When I graduated from art school, my parents gave me a copy of an article on how to handle rejection. And I was
Mm.
like, what kind of graduation present is this? Uh, but the other article they gave me was on the Babe Ruth strikeout theory of success.
Mm.
And the gist of it was that Babe Ruth had more home runs than anyone, but he also had more strikeouts. And the
Wow.
conclusion is, of course, that if you're not swinging, you're not hitting it. And
Mm.
so it's a good reminder to me to always put myself out there and to just not be deterred by rejection. It's if you're not getting rejected, then that means you're not trying hard enough because
Mm.
you need to really reach. And I mean, at least I feel like I have to, in order to grow as an artist and as a person. It's really important to push that comfort zone and to, as an artist, I feel like if I stop growing, then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is there? It's so important. And I'm never quite satisfied with my
Mm.
work anyway, so it keeps me
Yeah.
moving forward.
Man. Do you have like little studio practices or things that you do that kind of keep honing your skills or challenge you? Because because I know it's pretty easy after doing it for so long that you could get into a situation where feels like maybe you're not challenging yourself, or it's you're confident in what you're doing, but you kind of want to do something new or different or try something. So how do you kind of go about that then, now that you've had this career for so long, how to keep kind of yourself challenged and excited and trying new things?
I don't know because in a lot of ways I feel like I'm still, in my career like it feels like it did when I was 30,
Mm.
even though I'm 55 now. It's like I just feel like there's so much more I want to do with my work, and it's trying to attain this level of something in my work that is always just in front of me. And
Mm.
um, there are times when I feel like, oh, okay, I'm really happy with that, but I'm always looking at my work and thinking, does that really convey what I want it to? Could it be done better?
Mm.
Could it convey more? I don't know. I want it to give a sense of place and a sense of valuing, of feeling, that's hard.
Yeah. Do you
It's
have like
always
a set amount of time that you'll spend with a painting before you achieve that? Or is it something like,
uh,
I don't even know, like,
I've, when you do this, as you set deadlines for yourself
yeah.
because either they're set by someone else or you set them for yourself because otherwise nothing ever gets done. And
Right.
ultimately what happens is the deadline comes and you have to decide that you're satisfied with the work and it goes out the door.
Yeah.
But if it stays around me long enough, I might see things that I want to change on it and probably will.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but sometimes I'll look at something that I didn't like, and over time I'll think, no, I'm not touching that. That's exactly the way I want it. That's usually as long if I feel like there's nothing more I would do to make that better, then that's done.
Mm. Sometimes, and this is just me being green, but there are times when I'm working on a piece and there's just like, I want it to be more
Yeah.
or I want it to be better, but I don't necessarily know what it is, like technique wise or, value or color or whatever. And I don't know what to actually do to it to make it better. I just know it's not quite aligning with the vision that I
Hmm.
had for the piece. And that's when I miss that kind of school atmosphere
Yeah.
where you had fresh eyes coming in and looking at your work. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, man, I wish I had that because sometimes I just don't know.
Yeah, well, and that's where, like, for me, it's lucky that I have my mentor, my dad,
Mm.
where I can take something to him, and especially because he knows me and he knows my work, and he can look at it and say, "I see what you're trying to do here, and here's what you can do." Um, so it's there are mentors and other people out there, and that's a great way to reach out. I have people that I show something to and say, "What do you think?" And it's always tricky because they could say something and you're like, "Yeah, no, that's not what I was thinking I was going
Right.
to do." But that's part of where affiliations with other artists can be really helpful
Mm.
because sometimes you don't even have to ask, what would you do? It's just by learning and noticing other work that's out there that we can learn and get ideas about where to take something.
Mhm.
Uh, but I really sometimes for me it's just a matter of looking at a piece for a while at different times of day, turning it to the wall for a while and not looking at it, and then turning it back around and looking at it with fresh eyes,
Mm.
or having someone else look at it. Those things can really help when I'm stuck on something. Some I belong to Washington Society of Landscape Painters, and when we go out painting, we end the day with a critique, and that's really helpful because you get
Yeah.
sometimes feedback that you didn't even anticipate.
Mm. Now, do you have a specific way that when you're working on a piece that you are building that piece of artwork or designing it, like that's pretty consistent from piece to piece, or is every piece that you do you kind of go about the artistic process differently?
Uh, Generally, it's the same, but I don't necessarily stick with it all the time, and
Okay.
sometimes I do change it up. I mean, with plein air paintings, it's generally pretty, consistently the same approach.
Yeah.
But with studio pieces, sometimes it can change because, of course, I'll end up going in and repainting something. Lately, I've been taking out old paintings that were maybe half done and just deciding, you know what, I think I'm just going to completely redo that and take it in a
Mm.
different direction. That's the beauty of it. If it's still in the studio, I can just decide to change it and
Yeah.
do something
Oh.
else with it.
How would you say your work has changed over the years from when you were first coming out of the academy to where it is now? Do you feel like it's gone through quite a gamut of changes, either in style or subject matter?
I don't really know. I guess it's become a little more focused in terms of kind of knowing what I really want to capture, but and maybe it's gotten looser, with doing more plein air painting over the last 15 years or so. I focus more on brush work as a result of that.
Mm.
I and maybe my process has changed a little bit more because of that. But otherwise, I don't know. I don't really know how it's changed. Maybe probably just gotten looser is a big part of it.
Mm. Do you have a hard time looking at old work? Like work that you've done years ago?
Not really.
No?
Not really. Unless it's something that I just find in the studio that was obviously never good enough to even put in a frame. But I don't. To me, they're kind of little windows into where I was as an artist at a certain time. And the other thing I find is by the time I'm finished with the painting and I sign it and frame it and it goes out the door, all I'm seeing is what I'm not happy with on it. Like, I'm just looking at it and thinking, oh, geez, on the out the door, I'm like, oh man, I should have done this to it, or I should have done that to it, because I've been like so close to it for all this time. And I find this with the portraits I do too, because I like you said earlier about how you have this idea of where you want it to be. When I started painting, I have all these high hopes for everything. It's going to be this amazing painting and it's going to convey all this stuff. And then in the end, I'm like, I don't know if it's maybe kind of there, but it's not all that. But then when I come back and I look at them years later, I don't remember all that. I just appreciate it for what it is. And, as long as I'm keeping up to my standards in terms of like, if it goes out, it's because I was happy with it, then I don't mind seeing it. And it's kind of looking at my younger self in a way.
Yeah. Do you have a specific painting or project that you can think of that you've done over the years that you're particularly proud of, that you were just really happy with it?
Oh gosh. I don't know. Yeah, there's some paintings that are out there, as a professional artist, when your paintings sell and they're out in the world, like we're not that sentimental about them because we're like, that's their job.
Right?
Their job is to go out in the world and be hung on someone else's wall and bring them pleasure for however long it's hanging there. Yeah, I don't know. I just totally went off on a tangent about what
No, that's great.
But if it's, I only have regret if they weren't quite finished. And there have been a few times when maybe that happened too soon. Like they sold too soon and maybe I wasn't as ready to let go of them as I thought I was. But to me, if they're out there and they're hanging on the wall and someone else is connecting with them, then that's really what it's all about. It means so much to me for someone to say, you know what, I look at that painting on the wall every day and it just takes me there. And I love that.
Yeah. There is actually one specific piece. I'm going to share it with our viewers now, see if it'll pop up here. It's actually this one. So this piece, the one that hung at the American Society of Marine Artists Conference opening in Jamestown.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because this was the first piece, like the original piece I've ever seen of yours, but this is one I keep coming back to quite often. Seeing it, I mean, I've seen other pieces of yours, but this one has always really stuck with me. And seeing it in person, it was very moving. And where did you paint this, by the way? Do you remember where you were?
Yeah, sure. This is Florida. This is, okay. I have a place in Fort Pierce, Florida, and do a lot of plein air painting there on the beach, looking out over the ocean. Okay. And this is a studio piece, but it evolved out of many mornings spent painting on the beach.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was the case because I lived in Florida for about a little over 8 years.
Hmm.
And this was my favorite time of day to go and
Hmm.
walk along the beach, kind of
Hmm.
past the optimal sunset, starting to get into twilight. And you had
Uh-huh.
all those beautiful colors. And I felt that you captured it so realistically to how it feels. And there is something for, especially in school, you can be taught technique and practice technique all day, but I
Hmm.
think it's hard to communicate or teach someone how to capture a feeling.
Hmm.
And I think that you did that so wonderfully, especially as something that I saw and experienced all the time, listening to the waves and seeing the light on the water and the pelicans flying through. It was just very moving to me. And so
Uh-huh.
I wanted to kind of look at this piece with you and wonder if there's anything else about this piece that you could share with us and share with our viewers, because it was very special to me. I wish I could have bought this painting. I really wanted it. But
Well, thank you. Yeah, I really love this painting too. It kind of leads me to the idea that's so important in my own work, my art, is the importance of being an observer and having a chance to commune with nature, because that's sort of the well we draw on to paint nature. Is the
yeah.
inspiration is what it feels like to be out in nature. And if you don't know that feeling, then you can't convey it to someone. I really view art uh, as a way of creating that leads our viewers to, or the people who appreciate art, to see things a little bit differently. Maybe they experience the world differently through art, because maybe if it leads them to notice something that they didn't notice before, or just to pay closer attention to things in the world. And um, for me, even something as simple as the pelicans flying by over the waves, it's so, and when I see that, I just want to like hold on to that and
Mm,
to be with that. It's so it's just really moving, and it's
yeah.
beautiful. And so uh because I am so connected with that feeling, it sort of led me to really try to paint this in a way that conveyed that.
Mm,
And I love the way pelicans fly in these beautiful, graceful waves. It's just,
yeah.
there's just such a natural elegance and beauty to the way all the elements of nature come together, and being able to capture that is just really, really important to me.
Mm. I know you probably get asked this a lot, but for a piece like this, now this is pretty large. Um, if I recall, how long would you probably spend on working on a piece like this typically? Or do you have multiple going at the
Yeah, I
same time?
usually have several going at a time. This piece is 18 by 36. Um, I like to have it in the studio for months.
Mm,
I find that the ones that I don't have in the studio for that long, I tend to miss things that I wanted to do
mm,
with them. So I don't remember exactly how long I was working on that, but I work on it. I set it aside. I may even think I finished it at some point, and then I'll just look at it different times a day, in
mm,
different rooms or whatever, and really decide if it hits me the way I want it to.
mm. Now, when you're working in the studio, do you have kind of like studio must-haves, like things that you always like to have with you, either, something that you're listening to or a particular tool or something that you find yourself going back to that, that I really like that, I enjoy that, that helps me in my creative space and to create the kind of feel and the look that I want.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Coffee, tea,
Yeah.
uh, music. I mean, whatever I'm listening to is really important, and it'll change according to what I'm working on, whether it's music that will allow me to really focus and concentrate deeply, or
Mm,
NPR or some, podcasts or classical music. It really depends what I'm working on, what I'll listen to, but
Yeah.
music or something on the radio is really important to me. And I have a really good easel that I'm really happy with. That I believe that having tools that really function really well means that I'm not as conscious of them. They just sort of allow me to do my work without me really having to think about them. I use an arm palette. That palette allows me to just mix my paint and paint without really even thinking about, oh gosh, this palette's in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Or, just having everything so that it is easy to engage with work is really important in the studio. And I'm lucky my studio is separate from my house. It used to be my garage. So it's a separate space. At different times over many years, I've had a studio outside the home, which I'm actually a really big fan of, as long as it's not far away. Everyone rushing to work from home. And it doesn't really allow you necessarily the separation or the space to focus. You need to at least close a door.
Right.
That's like, for me, the bare minimum is close a door to separate and to have the space to have your studio.
That's really good. Yeah, I feel like I'm the same way. When I first started out, I just got married, didn't have a lot. And so I was just painting in the bedroom, like one of the extra bedrooms.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
I hated it though, because inevitably I would think about, I need to cook this and I need to clean that. And the house is a mess. And I would just get so stressed out about kind of the mundane, everyday things.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I was constantly mentally distracted from being able to work. So after when we bought our first place and sold our first place and moved out here to Washington, that was kind of the bare minimum. We need at least something that has a shed or something that's separate that I can convert into a studio, because otherwise I can't focus. I won't get anything done.
Yeah. No, I totally hear you. Yeah. My first apartment in Baltimore, I had my easel at the foot of my bed, essentially.
Nice.
And it worked. I worked, but it was hard. It's with each, step, I had more and more of a defined space. So I'm sure you feel that. I mean, it gives you sort of the headspace, gives you the physical space to focus on your work. And I find it really, really important. And I acknowledge that it is a luxury. Not everyone gets to step into a separate space. And ultimately, artists will make art wherever they can, but you certainly support yourself more by having a good dedicated space.
So can I ask, are you working on any specific projects or pieces right now that you're really excited about, or that you're kind of working towards in the future? Something that you'd be able to share with our listeners?
I'm actually right now trying to finish up a couple of portraits for a deadline. So that's for the next couple weeks. That's kind of consuming a lot of my focus, and which is good. It's really, I like the balance of portrait work and paintings of nature. But I've been sketching some new paintings to do, marine paintings, and I'm just really excited to get those going. All I have are sketches so far. And I have a couple that are in progress that I just really haven't had time to. Every now and then I'll, at the end of the day, dab some paint on them and try to rebalance some colors or some values. But after the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to really focus a lot more on these, and trying to do some start some new larger pieces too. So sometimes you go with whatever is the closest deadline, right? Whether it's a show or commission or whatever, that becomes the priority item, and that's it for me right now. And yeah, and it's springtime here, so we're about to launch our boat and maybe go sailing a little bit.
Oh, wonderful.
You
I'd
know,
love
the
I'd
communing
love
with
to
nature thing is important.
I'd love to hear some stories about that. Either like a favorite like sailing experience or experience you've had on the water, or I know you mentioned to me recently that you've done some diving.
Yeah.
Um, that, just some special memories that you've had on the water, connected with the water, that have really stayed with you and that you feel have influenced your work.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on the water, sailing and rowing and crabbing and fishing, and I just I never want to be very far from it. And so yeah, I spend as much time as I can on or near the water. And this recently this winter, everything from the pandemic was kind of backed up, so all this travel that was supposed to happen over the last couple
Mm,
of years is starting to happen now.
yeah.
So we did a trip with our niece down to the Bahamas, sailing for
Oh,
a week down there in the Exumas, which was just wonderful. It was amazing, and wonderful snorkeling and
yeah.
beautiful sailing, and it was really great. And then we went with some friends to French Polynesia, which was a huge trip, and
Mm.
that's where we did the some scuba diving, and it was my first time seeing dolphins underwater. It
Wow,
was,
so
oh
cool.
gosh, that was amazing. They're just doing their. It's I've only ever seen them from up above.
Mm,
To just see them swimming around doing their dolphin thing was just really cool. So yeah, it was really a great trip. Just
mm,
beautiful nature and scenery and wildlife.
mm.
I loved it. That sort of thing really recharges me when I get
Yeah,
back from experiences like that. I mean, and I was painting while I was there. I was
yeah.
doing just a little bit of plein air painting. I took a thumb box with me. Um, but I come back really fully inspired.
Mm. Wow.
And it was pretty neat. Yeah,
Do you,
I love your paintings of underwater life. It's so neat to be able to bring that above the surface and share
mm,
it with people, and
thank
that's
you.
really, really cool.
The water is just, it's one of those really special places that I found that it really forces you to slow down
Mhm.
and be present. And when I'm on the water or in the water, it seems like any kind of care or worry or anxiety just kind of takes a backseat. I mean, I'm not thinking about the mortgage payment
Yeah.
or, family drama or whatever is going on. It's just, I don't know,
Yeah.
it really frees the mind, I think, and the
Mhm.
soul. And I think there's something really beautiful and healing about that. There's
Yeah.
personally that's what draws me to marine life and the marine environment in general. That's just like, I know, you feel at peace with yourself and the world,
Mhm.
being by the water. And I
Mhm.
don't know all the reasons for that. I've just found that to be very true.
Yeah, years ago, a friend told me something like, the mountains are strength and the water is energy. And
Mm,
I think that's true, although I find strength and calm from the water too. So, and the
yeah,
energy. I mean, I love the wind, and yeah, I'm with you though. I think there's
yeah,
something really magical about that. I think anytime we can really pay attention to the world around us and really block out, set aside all those other things and just like, you know, be with it, the world around us, that's in a really meaningful, focused way. That's really important. And I wish more people had the opportunity to do that.
mm,
Maybe that's been a benefit of the pandemic, is that people have been outside more.
yeah,
But that's also sort of where art comes in, because art
mm,
is a way of saying, "Hey, look at this. Look around you. Look at look at the water, look at that pond or
Yeah.
that puddle, or, think about what that water looks like underneath, or
Mm.
that's where art can just really kind of help people redirect a little bit and focus on those things.
Yeah, that's really special. It's there's something, I don't know, I think it's what makes doing this for a living so special, not just for you as an artist being able to experience those things, but that the power to share those moments with other people and
Mhm.
hopefully move them in such a way that they're like, yes, I'm also excited about that. And I want to go out, and experience this for myself and enjoy it and, relax and be at peace and be present and kind of tune out all this other visceral stuff, in life that at the end of the day doesn't matter as much. you
Yeah,
know?
and you know what? When people care about things too, and they value things, then they're interested in protecting them.
Right.
And conservation is so huge. My wife works in ocean conservation work,
Mhm.
and trying to save the oceans from a million different threats right now. And
Yeah.
um, if people can realize that this isn't all just a given, that this is all going to be here all the time, and
Right.
it's we have to protect we have to be good stewards of this planet, and maybe seeing paintings of something and realizing that it needs protection,
Yeah.
that shoreline is endangered, or that whale might not be around much longer, or
Right.
whatever. Maybe it motivates people to take action, because otherwise we're just documenting a world that's not going to be here that much longer. So
Yeah.
it's a really important influence, I hope.
No, I think it does. And there used to be, well, probably still is, but kind of this mindset when I've talked to some people that, oh, the world is just so big and so vast. What I do doesn't really make a difference. Like me throwing this piece of trash in the water or whatever, it's not that big a deal because it's just so big. And I think, over the years with how things have changed more and more, that mindset is changing and people realizing, actually it's not that big and there's a lot of people on this planet, and
Mhm.
actually what I do matters, even if it's something small. If everyone just did something small,
Right.
to either limit their single plastics use or just
Yeah.
picked up after themselves, when they,
Or ask
it would help.
or ask the companies they give their money to
Yeah.
buy these things, to change the way they do business, because they're the ones who are really benefiting from um, not being good stewards. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really important. It's not a given that all this beauty around us is going to be here if we don't protect it.
Yeah. It's just another testament, I think, to the power of art is that, you're creating these images of, even like that pelican piece. And when people see that and they're moved by that, inspired, that they connect with that and they're part of that moment, that
Hmm.
experience, that place. And I think so often, because we're so busy in our lives doing stuff and doing the grind and all this stuff, you're mentally and emotionally, it kind of removes you from that place.
Hmm.
Even in Florida, people, when I used to live there, people would joke, oh, you just must go to the beach all the time, you just must be there. And the reality of it is, once you live there for a while, you realize 4 or 5 months go by and you live less than a mile, but you don't actually see it because you don't
Yeah.
take the time to go down there. And I feel like that's experience for a lot of people. They don't see these things, they don't experience them. And so they feel removed, like they're somehow not connected. But all of us, no matter where we live on the planet, our lives and even being able to breathe oxygen is so tied to the water and so connected to the water and the way that we live.
Mm.
And so hopefully by creating these images, it's trying to draw that connection again, like you
Right.
said, to the water, and that we are affected by it and what we do affects it. And we need to protect it and preserve it because it's beautiful, but we want to see this in real life. and hopefully not just this painting,
Right.
down
Yeah.
the road, and only have this painting as a record of what it used to be, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, a lot of people, it's 2 weeks at the beach in the summer if they're lucky.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even get that, and so the connection to the natural world is tenuous at best,
Mm.
for many people. But maybe through art they can really connect, whether it's you know, contemporary installations, or land art, or whatever it is, a way to connect, or paintings of pelicans or turtles, or even just a nice marsh.
Right.
Maybe people can really appreciate the beauty of that,
Yeah.
for what it is.
Mm. Well, I'm just so thrilled to be able to have some time to talk to you. I know our time is starting to wind down here, so I'd like to ask you just kind of a couple closing questions,
Sure.
especially for some of our younger viewers. We are going to have some younger viewers and young artists who will be watching these, and so I just love if you could share maybe one or two pieces of advice that you wish you would have known as a kind of new younger artist starting out, like any pieces of advice you'd like to share for younger artists.
For younger artists, I would say, just never give up in terms of following your dream. If you can really dream it in terms of building a life around art, then find a way to make that happen. And it may be through an opportunity you didn't anticipate. It could be through some avenue that you didn't really think was going to lead you in an art life. But just be really open-minded, and just believe in yourself, even when you doubt
Mhm.
yourself. Fake it till you make it. Just really, seriously, I think
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to say, nope, I believe in myself, and just
Mm.
get out there and stick with it. It's a tough world out there, but believe in your art, and figure out ways to make it happen, whatever you have to do that. Don't give up.
Well, thank you so much. What? Thank you for sharing that. How would you, now that you've been doing this for a while, how would you define success as an artist? What does that look like for you to be successful?
Oh gosh, for me, it's the success has been to be able to do something that I love while supporting myself, and to build really a life that I wanted. It's not just having necessarily the job I wanted, but the life I wanted,
Mm.
in terms of the time I spend outside in nature, or on the water, traveling, and painting. It's For me, it's about building a life, and being able to support myself. So that's
Mm.
success for me, is
Yeah.
having done that. Well, still working on it.
Right.
The work never ends. The quest never ends.
Mm.
The journey gets a little more interesting. That's all.
Yeah.
But as they say, life comes at you fast. So
Right.
it's got to be ready.
It goes by so quick.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like just yesterday, I graduated and was trying to figure this whole thing out. And now it's been like 7 years already. And I'm like, where did it go?
Yeah.
And I still
Yeah.
feel like, oh, I just graduated and I'm just starting.
Oh my gosh. I mean, joyful. I feel the same way. And it's been, I don't even remember how many years since I graduated. So yeah, I guess maybe that's a good thing, because it is a quest. It is a journey, but yeah, it does go fast. Just, you have to appreciate the journey too. You have to keep looking around you, not just looking forward, but appreciate where you are too.
I think it's easy to fall into that mindset where you have these goals and dreams of things you want to accomplish and
Mhm.
do, throughout your art career, and realize a lot of those, they take a lot of time and intention. and don't happen overnight. And then you realize, oh, I've been working so hard to try to make this happen. And I didn't stop and proverbially, stop and smell the roses during the midst of it and actually enjoy the process of creating and kind of the beautiful moments that people don't see when you're alone in your studio or with your family. You just can't wait to live or wait to, I will feel good as an artist if I'm just able to accomplish this thing in the future. It's like, no, you're learning and growing and discovering and exploring all that now, and you're going to miss out on the joy of that if it's just all about trying to chase this one thing.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, it's about the journey, and if we're all impatient, but if we let that impatience consume us, then we're just making everything harder for ourselves. There are simple pleasures in every day of creating art, and even just being in the world. And it's so important to be conscious of those. Perspective is everything, not just in drawing barns, but in life. Perspective, it's all about where you stand, and it's really important to fully appreciate that.
So now, after talking to you for a little bit, where now are you exhibiting your work, or where do you sell your work, or where people can find your work now that are interested in even learning more about you and your work, or interested in a piece? Where would they go to find that?
I have a website, lisaegeli.com, and I try to update it with things that are coming up, but mostly I'm doing group exhibitions right now, so I'll post those in the website.
Okay.
And I'm on Instagram and Facebook too, so you can always see what the latest news is there.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I feel like I could actually talk to you for a really long time. And an hour podcast is not enough time. But for the sake of the podcast, we'll have to bring it to a close. But I just want to thank you again for being willing and spending this hour chatting with us and talking a little bit about your life and your work. And even some about conservation and things. This has just been a delight. So thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Joyful. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for tuning in to the Blue Palette Podcast, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Blue Palette Podcast. This has been your host, Joyful Enriquez. If you would like to learn more info about ASMA, you can find them online at www.americansocietyofmarineartists.com and on all social media platforms.